What's going on, guys? Welcome back to this video. Today we're doing TryHackMe, and it's gonna be the last task in this room, threat modeling. We will be talking about the PASTA framework. We'll be explaining the differences between PASTA framework and other frameworks that we have talked about in the previous videos. Just to remind you guys, these frameworks are all part of what is called the threat modeling. You conduct threat modeling as a plan, as a process, part of an information security program developed by your department. So let's explain PASTA here. So PASTA has, or in this task, there is a couple of questions, and we have a flag from which or by which we're going to complete the task. And there is a view site button here by which we can view the exercise and find the flag. Alright, so, and there is this page, or there is this document I found online. It also explains the PASTA framework. We're going to go over this. For now, let's go over the PASTA framework. So, PASTA stands for Process for Attack Simulation and Threat Analysis. That's the abbreviation of the name. Now, the thing is, guys, PASTA is risk-centric. Previously, we saw that Stride framework is best used for changes in software systems, or if you are implementing software development lifecycle or a new application. We saw that the Writeup framework was actually best used for use cases where you need a quantitative approach or assigning scores to the risks. And MITRE, ADT, and CK, we saw that this framework was best used to study adversary tactics and techniques. Now, in PASTA framework, we focus on risks, and it is very good framework that can be aligned with business objectives and the stakeholders' view of the risks and vulnerabilities. So it's kind of understands the business angle of threats and vulnerabilities. That's why PASTA can be widely used for more than threat modeling. Can also be used as part of risk assessment. Now, the components of PASTA, as you saw, guys, every framework has components or stages that can be mapped to the organization's assets. So if you want to use PASTA for your risk assessment and threat modeling, we need to go through these stages. The first thing, we need to define the objectives. Okay, so what are we doing? What are the goals of using the PASTA framework? What do we need to prioritize? And then we need to define the technical notes or technical scope. So here we create an inventory of assets. So we identify the hardware, the software, the data, and we actually develop a clear understanding of the architecture, the dependencies, and the flow of data. Now, basically, this step should be kind of already done by your organization or by your team. Because there should be already inventory of all of the assets that organization has, which is part of any information security program. Part of the program, you have to create an inventory of the assets. So this step is kind of already done. And this step, defining the objectives, objective is clear. It's to align the information security program with the business objectives, and to make sure that the security controls and countermeasures fall within the business interests. That's the objective all the time. So the objective and technical scope are kind of predetermined. Now, if we go further in details, we can see the third step is decomposing the application. Now, when you break down the system or the application, whatever we are studying, from the assets into components. For each component, we research the weaknesses, the entry points, the attack surfaces, and we identify other attack vectors for the component we are studying. The component could be a newly developed application, a newly developed website, a newly introduced feature, right? Or it could be the whole system. Then we analyze the threats. After we have identified the system or the component for which we're going to create a threat modeling plan or identify the risks and threats, we need to analyze the threats. We need to find out what are the possible threats. They could be insider threats, they could be accidental exposure of data, or it could be external attackers. And then we study the vulnerabilities and weaknesses. So here we can use vulnerability analysis, scanning, or penetration testing to find the weaknesses and the vulnerabilities. And here we analyze the attacks. So after I found what kind of vulnerabilities and weaknesses and threats that may hit the application or the system, we create or we simulate potential attack scenarios. Now in this step, you might go to the MITRE ATT and CK. You might do that to create potential attack scenarios based on the data you have prepared, right? So here in this step, we create a kind of mapping. So for every vulnerability, weakness, and threat, we actually list down possible attacks that may happen. And the last step is the risk and impact analysis. So in risk and impact analysis, guys, we prioritize the already found threats and risks based on their impact and likelihood. Impact, what kind of damage it may cause to the organization and how severe it is, and what is the likelihood. I mean, how likely is this to happen? And as you can see, guys, the chosen countermeasures should be aligned with the organization risk tolerance and security objectives. Okay, so these are the components of the framework, and this is the definition framework. Let's now jump to this document. So this document can be found online, okay? And if you want to read into more details on this framework, I found this online. As you can see, these are the same steps: business objectives, the scope, decomposition, threat analysis, detection of vulnerabilities, attack enumeration, and risk and impact analysis. So here they take the framework step by step. Business objectives affect web apps, and then we have threat modeling stage. I'm gonna put the link of this document online, and don't forget that these notes are part of channel membership. So now if we go to the practical scenario we have here, okay, that's the scenario. Apply the concepts. Okay, scenario: your organization is known for its online banking platform, catering to many users across the Asia Pacific region. To ensure its resiliency to potential threats, you are tasked to conduct a threat modeling exercise using the PASTA framework. Okay, so part of your exercise, there are teams that can be considered as stakeholders. So we have development team, those who create the systems and applications, the system architecture team, those who create the necessary infrastructure to host the applications, hosting, cloud services. Security team, part of the information security department, your team, and business stakeholder team. These are the business analysts and strategic planners. So basically, these are people who are creating the higher plan for the organization, higher planning, and ensure that the strategic goals of the business are met. You're going also to need to consult these people. So let's go over the exercise. Okay, I need to work with someone who can define the objectives of our threat modeling exercise to identify the critical assets that need to be protected. So here we are conducting the first two steps: the defined objectives and technical scope. So for that, we're gonna need not the information security, we're gonna need the strategic planning. Nope. we're going to need the maybe strategic planning, I guess. Yeah. So, hey, I'm currently working on a threat modeling plan. I would like to ask you for your expertise. And we ask the business analyst, what are the critical assets and processes in our online banking platform that we need to protect? So basically, here we define the priorities. What are the processes and data that we need to protect, which are critical part of the application. So we have customer, personal, and financial data. That's the case of every organization. This is very broad and generic. Secure our transactions processing systems, ensuring the availability and integrity of our online banking services. These are typical priorities for every organization, depending on the type. But the first one and the last one, integrity, availability, and confidentiality, are typical targets to protect for every organization. So for finance systems, they may need to secure the transaction processing systems as well as a process. Okay, we got this. Now we got the scope, we got the assets, right? Let's go now. I don't know about our infrastructure. I need someone who can define the architecture of our online banking application. So here we need to define the architecture, right? So why the architecture? Because still we need to the inventory of the assets, right? I can also be seen as a step into decomposing the application. So let's now find out about the infrastructure. We're gonna go to or get the aid of the system architecture team, IT teams maybe. Hello, can you provide an overview of the application's infrastructure? Okay, so what do we use? We use Amazon EC2 Compute Cloud for the virtual machines instances, RDS, and Amazon S3. And they go further in detail to tell you that we utilize Amazon S3 for storing static assets and files. These are the buckets, right? Buckets can be considered as file servers maybe, such as customer profile pictures and document uploads. EC2 for hosting microservices via virtual machines, and RDS for storing customer data. So they use a mix of file servers, virtual machines to host the application, and databases to host the customer data. So now we know some other parts of the assets as well. Okay, so now we defined the objectives, the assets, and we know what is the application. But first we need to decompose the application. So to decompose the application, we're gonna need, as you can see, I need to understand how our online banking application works. So we go to the development team. Hey there, can you provide an overview of the application's main feature? So to break down the application, we study the features. So we have the secure user registration and authentication. We have account management part, fund transfers, bill payments, and account statements. Typical parts of any online banking application. They also offer a mobile app. Okay, and the last thing we need to study the threats, vulnerabilities, and weaknesses. We go to the information security department. Now that I already know how our systems and applications work, I need to align with someone who can point out the potential threats and vulnerabilities. So for that, we're going to go to the team that we belong to, information security. Okay, so they go on to tell us that based on the input we provided them, or based on the assets that we are researching, threats can be external attackers. What kind of attacks? We could have brute force attacks because we have account management feature, SQL injection because we have the search functionality and logins as well, cross-site scripting, or distributed denial of service attack. In addition, insecure AWS configurations. This is also a threat. This is also a vulnerability, such as exposed public buckets. Exposed public buckets can cause external attackers or external parties to be able to read the files stored in them. So this falls back to misconfigurations, namely permissions. And RDS endpoints may incur potential risks. I see. Now based on these potential attacks and threats, what can we do to mitigate them? So to mitigate them, first for brute force, we implement account lockouts. So after like 5 or 6 failed attempts, the user will be locked out and prevented from logging in or trying again. SQL injections can be mitigated by secure coding practices, namely parameterized queries. For cross-site scripting, we need user input filtering and data encoding, and for those attacks, we use load balancers. For cloud security, we need to harden all AWS services and limit the accessibility of each one only to the intended data flows. This means that we need to create the proper permissions according to the identities and accounts we have in place. Okay. Now we go to strategic planning. So here we consult these people to understand the impacts of the work. The last thing I need is someone who can provide the potential impact of the risks we have just uncovered. Okay. So they tell us that a successful attack could lead to financial loss of our customer and our bank, regulatory penalties, and significant reputational damage. These are typical impacts that could be incurred by any organization. So we have finished. Now we're going to answer the questions. So what should be the top priority for the online banking platform as mentioned by the business analyst? The top priority will be protecting customers' personal and financial data, securing transactions, and ensuring service availability. Now, according to the system architect, what are the primary technical assets of the online banking system? We saw that they are the EC2 instances, databases, and the S3 buckets. What components of the application did the lead developer highlight? So the components are, as we saw guys, user registration, account management, fund transfers, typical features of any payment processing system. According to the security engineer, which type of threat is not considered? So brute forcing is considered against the accounts. SQL injection is still considered because we have databases, but social engineering attack is not considered against the application. It may be considered organization-wide, but application, according to the scope we are handling, which is narrowed down on the payment processing application, we don't consider the social engineering attacks. Which vulnerability was mentioned by the security engineer as a potential issue for the online banking platform? So could be one of these, right? Unpatched systems. It is still an issue for the online banking platform, but he mentioned that cloud infrastructure is more likely to happen. Cloud infrastructure misconfigurations. According to the security engineer, which mitigation strategy does match the identified threats? Not spam filtering, not CSRF tokens, account lockouts. These are still valid mitigation methods, but not to the scope we have. And lastly, in the risk and impact analysis phase, what potential consequence of a successful attack was mentioned by the business analyst? A potential consequence is not system upgrades and not decrease in stock prices. It is the loss and reputational damage. And this is your flag for this room. So we are finally finished with this room. I hope guys that by breaking down these tasks for every framework individually, you have kind of comprehended every framework and how it works completely. And now next we're gonna step and go on to learning path. So learning path here. So we are in the security engineer. Let's see where it is. Yeah, so we are here and we have finished the threat modeling and governance and regulation. Next we're gonna tackle down risk management and vulnerability management. So I hope you guys enjoying this series, and I'm gonna see you in the next video.